Hello, everyone, and welcome to Classic Vinyl Podcast. I am one of your hosts today, Justin, and I'm here with my other host, Tyler.
I am so happy to be here.
You're always happy to be here.
I am. I even though I live in a constant state of rage, I am always happy to be here with this podcast.
Yeah, and you say you're in a state of rage, but I've actually never seen that from you.
I know. I'm pretty mellow for somebody that's just constantly seething like an erupting volcano.
What do you think about our episode today?
This album's all over the place.
Yeah,
But it all fits together.
It does. Okay, so on this episode, we're going to be reviewing the Doors' sophomore album, Strange Days. Now, I want to be upfront about everything first off. The Doors are one of my favorite bands, if not my favorite band, so I'm going to be very
Biased
I'm
on
going to be
this.
very biased,
Yeah.
but it's my true feelings too. But I have a lot, I love the music. It's been a part of my life for 40 years plus, easily. So to me, my favorite bands are the Beatles and the Doors. Maybe the Beatles edge out the Doors just a little bit, just based on quantity of music put out, because the Doors were together a short time and only released 6 studio albums. But I am very, as you say, biased towards the Doors because of what they mean to me and how much history I have with them.
You do. You have a lot of experience with the Doors.
And as we were talking, for Record Store Day, I bought the Doors mini record player
Yes, you did.
that comes with 3 mini single vinyls.
And it is adorable.
Yeah, and I can't believe I bought it because Adorsable.
Oh.
Because I'm very much a completist when it comes to Beatles and Doors things.
Which justifies that purpose in and of itself.
Well, and the funny thing is I know I don't want to be. I know the Doors have released everything in 40th anniversary editions and 50th. Keep rehashing, and I roll my eyes and then hit pay.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my history with them. I'm very much a completist. I would say with the Doors, the Beatles, and the Who a little bit. And
that's the spirit that built the British Empire into what it became.
Exactly. And it's a disease, I guess, because even though I scoff at a lot of the things they release, I still buy them. So there we go. So this is the second album we're doing of the Doors. It's the first artist we've actually done a second album of. Let me give you a little history on the Doors. They formed in Los Angeles in 1965. They consisted of Jim Morrison on vocals, Ray Manzarek on keyboards, Robbie Krieger on guitars, and John Densmore on drums. So Jim and Ray knew each other because they had attended UCLA film school together. And I guess after they had graduated and everything, Jim and Ray met up on the beach, and Ray asked Jim, "Hey, what you been up to?" And he says, "I've been writing lyrics." And he's like, "Let me hear some of them, man." And he sings him the lyrics to Moonlight Drive, and it blew Ray away.
Yeah, that sounds really romantic.
Yeah, and they said, "Hey, let's start a band right here."
Oh, they fell in love.
They fell in love. Yeah. Jim Morrison named the band The Doors, and that comes from the Aldous Huxley book, The Doors of Perception. You probably remember that from our previous episode.
Yeah, we do a little bit of a band introduction.
Yes.
So if you've listened to our first album, our review on The Doors, then a lot of this will be familiar. But if you haven't, or if you've forgotten, here's a little recap.
So the Doors are really hard to explain their sound because they have a lot of rock, jazz, blues, a psychedelic sound. I mean, you've got Morrison's baritone, dark eroticism vocals,
Oh, he's a very sexual man.
He is. And I mean, his crooning is, funny enough, almost Frank Sinatra-like in some ways. Different music, but
now that you mention that, yes.
He is very much that way.
Yeah.
And he worshipped Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley. So that was part of it. But
I'm intrigued by these little factoids about Jim Morrison.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because
it's piecing the puzzle together a little bit.
Yeah, because his crooning, and he's got that pseudo-poetic lyrical style, and it just all fits in. It's perfect. And the band, The Doors, is kind of a band you either love or you hate. I don't think a lot of people fall in the middle with them. And I may be wrong with that.
And I would not associate Jim Morrison singing with Frank Sinatra or Elvis Presley. But now that you mention it and listening to him, boy, that really fits together.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So the band, they got going in 65. They wrote some early songs and they were the house band for a little LA club called the London Fog. But after playing there for quite a while, they eventually worked their way up to become the house band for the Whiskey A Go-Go in LA, right on the Sunset Strip. So they were eventually signed by Elektra Records in August of 1966. They released their debut album in 1967, which was their self-titled The Doors album, which is the one we reviewed first. It reached number 2 in the charts, and it's actually been certified 4 times platinum. And it has their most successful single they've ever had, Light My Fire, which hit number 1. Strange Days, the album we'll be reviewing tonight, it reached number 3. Waiting for Sun, their third album, actually hit number 1. Soft Parade, which was kind of a departure from their sound. It was a little bit softer and it had strings and brass in it. You know, it was kind of looked at as, like I said, a departure, but completely different from the other Doors albums. But it's kind of got a cult following with the Doors people now, and a lot of people consider it their favorite album. But it reached number 6, and then Morrison Hotel, which was next, reached number 4, and their final album with Jim Morrison was L.A. Woman. It reached number 9. So all their albums hit the top 10. All their albums are platinum. L.A. Woman is 3 times platinum, and obviously their, like I said, their debut album is 4 times platinum. They released 6 studio albums with Morrison, 2 studio albums after his death in 1971, with Robbie and Ray taking the lead vocal duties. And they released a poetry album from Morrison in 1978. Morrison's recorded poetry. The living members of the Doors put music to it.
Yeah, and there's an example of that on this album.
It's a little bit different, but it's kind of similar. But the album they released in 1978 was American Prayer, and it's actually went platinum as well. They've had multiple...
American Prayer.
They've had multiple live albums, multiple compilation albums, greatest hits, box sets, 40th anniversary editions, 50th anniversary editions, etc., etc. Justin buys all of them for some unknown reason.
And I will always quote the great Jim Morrison, "You cannot petition the Lord with prayer."
Now, that is off their 4th album, The Soft Parade.
Is it?
And we will get to that sooner or later. That's not without a doubt.
It's a great quote. I love it.
Out of all the singles they released as a band, they only had 2 hit number 1, Light My Fire and Hello, I Love You, but they did have 13 total singles that charted in the top 100. They were the first American band to have 8 consecutive gold albums. First American band to do that. The band has sold over 100 million albums worldwide. Of course, Jim Morrison died of heart failure in Paris in 1971.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to throw that in. You know, and the sad and funny and crazy thing about that is his death really enhanced the band's legacy. I mean, he martyred the band, essentially. If he didn't have enough mysticism to him while he was alive, that certainly put that craziness out there, you know?
Yeah, it's very rude of him to go and die so early.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's, you know, when you talk about other bands and things, if they would have kept going, would it have been as good, you know, and that's hard to say.
He is in the 27 Club.
He certainly is. So they did release Oliver Stone's movie, The Doors, in 1991, which is something that kind of introduced me to the Doors, and it certainly reinvigorated the public to the Doors and brought their popularity back up. But anyone close to the Doors themselves, including the band members, hate the movie and said it's factually incorrect, most specifically about Jim Morris and what he was like. You know, Oliver Stone paints him as just a crazy, drug-addicted drunk, is back and forth, and that's far from the truth. So the movie The Doors really got me into the Doors, because whether, you know, it's not a historical piece about them, it's far from the truth. But if you want to watch a good movie that kind of shows a basic sketch of the band's life, and you hear a lot of good music and it really gets you into it, it's a good movie to watch, and you still need to watch it.
I do. I haven't seen it yet, but I do want to send my appreciation out to the great Val Kilmer for portraying Jim Morrison, regardless of how accurate that portrayal was.
He did an amazing job. He sang a lot of the parts in the film, and I thought he did good. I hope one day a true documentary, or I wouldn't even say a documentary, but a theatrical film or series about the Doors is made, because keep in mind, I'll still buy it.
Yeah. Come on. It's Oliver Stone, right?
Yeah.
You got to look at Oliver Stone films with big grain of salt.
You do. He certainly hits home with them. He goes for the theatrical value over the actual
it's very dramatic.
Value,
yeah.
You know. The Doors were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993, and they're selling just as many records today as they did in the 60s. So it's crazy, because they are one of the bands, when we talk about bands that don't seem to stand the test of time, the Doors certainly have. They're still played on all kinds of rock and roll radio. There's still plenty of movies and documentaries of things about them floating around. They're still releasing re-release stuff that Justin buys, and so... Yeah. You know, they're still as relevant today, maybe more so than they ever were.
Yeah, love them or hate them, you know the Doors.
Yeah, you do. Do you want to get to the album review?
Let's do it.
And now it's time for the album review.
Okay, so this episode we are going to review the Doors' second studio album, Strange Days. This album was released on September 25th, 1967 by Elektra Records. It was recorded at Sunset Sound Recorders in Hollywood. It's actually the same studio their debut album was recorded at. Produced by Paul Rothchild, who actually produced all of their albums except their final album, L.A. Woman. This was the first one of their albums recorded on an 8-track, which give them a lot of diversity in sounds and things they could do, and you notice that in some of the songs on here. And apparently they had heard Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and what they had done, and they wanted some of those other sounds.
They certainly got those sounds incorporated.
They did. So several songs on this album, or most of the songs on this album, were simply songs that were either recorded or they attempted to record for their first album. They were left over. There's a lot of early songs on here that were made as demos before their first album. So this is kind of part 2. You know, record companies only like put a certain amount of songs on an album. So if you're sitting there on 25 songs, you've got to whittle it down to 10 songs or 12 songs or whatever, you know. It's pretty tough.
But it doesn't seem like we're getting the dregs or the leftovers on this one. We're getting really good material.
Yeah, I even though a lot of these songs were thought to possibly be on their debut album, you got to keep in mind they had a lot of touring
and they could. These songs were probably around at the time.
Yeah, they were around at the time. They were still touring with them. They were still playing a lot of them, and maybe they hadn't polished them off fully or whatever. But yeah, I don't feel like this album is any kind of leftover. In fact, I feel this album's stronger than the first album.
All right.
So this album reached number 3 on the U.S. Billboard Top 200 charts. Sold almost 2 million copies worldwide. It's certified platinum by the RIAA, close to 2 times platinum. In fact, it probably will be by the end of the year. So obviously going through the band again on this album, Jim Morrison's vocals. Ray Manzarek plays the keyboards, the marimba, the harpsichord. Robbie Krieger plays the guitars, and John Densmore plays the drums. You've also got Doug Lubon, who plays bass on Unhappy Girl, Horse Latitudes, and When the Music's Over. And that's what's kind of funny about this band is they always employed a bass player in the studio on certain songs, but they never had a bass player live.
Interesting.
Ray would play I'm not sure what bass, but he'd play the bass on a bass organ.
Yeah, there's the bass is really prominent in this album.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, and when you listen to him live, the bass is very prominent. The way Ray plays it, too, it just plays out different.
It's just on a bass organ instead of a bass guitar.
Interesting, in my opinion.
I liked it.
So all songs on this album were credited to the band, and they did that for the first 3 albums. It was Soft Parade when Jim Morrison didn't want them credited to the whole band anymore because he wasn't real happy with some of the songs Robbie Krieger had written. So
yeah, Robbie.
that's when they started separating them. But on this, no matter who wrote the songs, they were credited to the whole band. Now, the album cover's kind of interesting. We looked at this before. It features street performers on a New York side street, right?
Yeah, this is a photograph that really could be a drawing. I mean, of a bunch of circus performers of all different types. You got acrobats, you got the strongman, you got
a juggler.
Yeah, and a little person dancing in the street. Yeah, it's a really bizarre picture, but it's just these are people who are dressed up in like their circus or carnival attire, but they're just out on a New York street.
So the funny thing is, from what I've read, number 1, Jim Morrison didn't want to be on the cover. But there is a little poster of him on the wall of the Doors, and he didn't want to be featured prominently on this. And all of these, except for the acrobats, were just people off the street. In fact, the guy playing the trumpet, I guess he was a guy they pulled out of a cab and paid him $5 to play a trumpet real quick for the picture. And it's kind of neat because if you look at the back side of the album as well, that's actually the extended photo. They go together. It would have looked better in a gatefold or something like that so you could see the whole thing together, but then you've got another one of the dwarfs trying to hand a tambourine to a lady or a man or something.
Is it a different dwarf or is it the same one?
They were actually twins.
Really?
Yeah.
No wonder they look so much alike.
It's funny because there's really nothing on the front cover to identify that it's by the Doors. So most stores had to put stickers on the front of them saying this is the Doors.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Because even though there is like a poster of the Doors, And it has the title of the album, Strange Days, on it.
But it's pretty small.
It is small. It is not prominent. It's easily missed.
So on this album, they've released multiple editions. They released 40th and 50th anniversary editions, which are essential for completists like myself because you want to get the outtakes and things like that. And they've done interesting remixes. They're worth having, but to me, the quintessential Doors catalog is having the original 6 studio albums. Or you can be like me and have them 15 different ways. Just to make you happy.
All of those need to be listened to.
So that's a little information about the album. Do you want to get to side 1?
Let's roll it.
Side 1.
Okay, so this album opens up with one of their oldest songs, the album title track, Strange Days. Lyrics on this song were by Jim Morrison, even though they were credited the whole band. This song was written in 1966, and it's got an interesting version on the London Fog record, a really old version, and it's really worth listening to if you can catch that. It's completely different than what hit this album. It's one of the earliest rock and roll songs to feature the Moog synth, which Jim sings through on this. It's really kind of gives him an interesting sound.
Yeah, it's real haunting feeling.
It is. Yeah. It's kind of strange. And the band actually made 2 music videos for this song. You can check them out on YouTube if you want to. So what are your thoughts on this song, Tyler?
This is a song where the bass guitar features prominently. There's also the organ or the signature keyboard. The Doors are.
That's the Doors sound. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got really beautiful music, but it's almost like Halloween music. It's real haunting. It's real foreboding feeling in the melody.
I think you got to kind of put yourself back in the times and realize how different the Doors were because you had a lot of the flower power and all that kind of stuff going on. And the Doors come in and they were
they're kind of Tim Burton-ish.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd go with that. I think my take on it is just they were the dark side of things instead of trying to go to the summer of love and happy-go-lucky type of stuff. They come in and...
I guess I should qualify that statement by saying this is kind of like what you get with Disney Studios employing Tim Burton,
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think they were out for something different, and the Doors sound, their music is unlike anything of that time, unlike really anything we've seen since.
It really changed things up.
Yeah, and I like the intro on this song. I love Morrison's voice on this song, singing through the Moog synth. It just gives it that eerie sound, and with the keyboards in the background. The drums are really good on this. It's got a good bass line, like you said. It's featured prominently. There's not a lot of guitar in this song because you're getting the Moog synth and the keyboards, but it's a really good song.
There's a lot of moments in this album, or even other Doors songs that aren't on this album, where there's kind of a dissonance that makes me feel a little like I need a V8. I'm walking kind of sideways, about to tip over.
Yeah, it's a strange, eerie song. But I mean, hell, it's called Strange Days.
Yeah, exactly. They capture that.
If you hear that early version on the London Fog, it's completely different. You play this on guitar, and it's kind of a simple E minor to A minor. So it's kind of interesting because that early version is just kind of a simple song, but in this, they really put those sounds, and I think that's where you get the 8-track recorder, and they're putting different sounds in this to give it that eerie feeling. But it's an excellent way to open an album, and like I've stated, and I'm going to keep stating, I'm very biased to this album. So we move on to the next song, Your Lost Little Girl. Now, this is a song written by Robbie Krieger, possibly a reference to the William Blake poem, A Lost Little Girl. That's been said by some band members. It's been refuted, so who knows. And there's kind of a funny thing about this. Jim Morrison had a hard time singing this for whatever reason. Didn't like it, didn't like the lyrics, or just couldn't get him down. I don't know. But there is a rumor that Pam Corson, his girlfriend at the time, had to visit the studio booth while he was singing and perform oral copulation.
She fellatiated him.
That's what they're saying. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's just rock and roll.
Well, that certainly adds a different element to the mix.
It does, when you're sitting there listening to his voice, wondering if that's what was going on. What are your thoughts on this song?
It has once again, prominent bass in the opening. Then got this, there's something really cool with the music where the organ trades places with the bass, and you got the organ keeping that beat going, and the bass is strumming along like it's doing the melody. It's really cool.
Yeah, and I believe Robbie Krieger plays the bass on this. I'm not sure, and that's something that they were able to do a little more of with an 8-track. You could play the guitar and then play the bass on another track and overdub it, right? That was something you could do a little easier.
The vocals on this weren't anything to write home about. It was Jim Morrison, but the best thing that I have going on is that that little tidbit of information that the rumor of Pam Cor's on there, and Jim with his eyes kind of rolling to the back of his head.
Well, I really like the vocals on this. I like his crooning way of just kind of singing through it, and there's a tad bit of echo on the vocal, and I kind of like it. You know, I think this has got a good little guitar solo in the middle, and the guitar throughout is amazing. And this is something else you'll hear me talk about is I think Robbie Krieger is an amazing guitar player. And one thing people have got to remember, he studied flamenco guitar for years and finger picking. But at this time, he had really only been playing, you know, like electric rock guitar for 2 years.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and he is one of the best, most underrated guitarists ever, in my opinion. And yeah, this is a good song. I really like this song. I like the keyboards and the keyboard runs during the chorus. It just fits in once again. It's the Doors, right?
This is a classic Doors song.
Yeah, it is. So let's move on to another song, Song 3, Love Me Two Times. This is a fairly popular song. Lyrics on this one were also written by Robbie Krieger. This was the second single to be released off the album. It reached number 12 on the Billboard charts. Weird thing about it, as suggestive as it is, it doesn't seem like it to us, but many radio stations wouldn't play this at the time or had a problem playing it because of its suggested "Love Me Two Times" lyrics. You know,
it's scandalous.
Love me twice today.
That you can't say things like that because they're talking about making love.
Yeah, it's just funny the things that you compare that to the things we allow now to hear. It's just kind of crazy, but
we can't have that sort of thing going across the radio.
So Ray Manzarek has stated in the past that Robbie wrote this song about lust and loss, but a lot of other people think it's about a sailor or a soldier spending the last day with his girlfriend before shipping off to war.
And it really fits either way.
It really does. And I think you ask a lot of these people what the songs are about, and a lot of them don't remember anyways. Now, the first thing for me on this song is it's got an amazing recognizable intro. It's got an amazing guitar riff throughout. I think Jim Morrison's vocals in this are very, very strong.
Yeah.
And I think this song pretty much rocks. You know, I love the Jim's, all right, yeah. You know, when he screams it out. His screaming or his strained vocals on whenever he does it, and we'll get into that like on When the Music's Over too, are amazing. If you really listen to the guitar throughout this song,
is there some special effect that they put on that guitar?
I'm not sure.
Because it is really cool, whatever it is, but that guitar sounds like it's been tweaked somewhat.
I'm sure they did something, but to me this is a good example of Robbie Krieger's guitar playing.
Yeah.
The drums have got a good beat throughout this song.
They're rocking out.
This is great. A pretty good rocking song for the Doors. You know, it's because the Doors were never really considered a hard rock band by any means, but this is a straightforward rock and roll song. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this?
You know, this is even a little hard rock. It's not soft by any means. This is rock and roll. It's a fun song. I really enjoyed this song, the writing of it. I gotta say something about the Doors is that they seem very overtly sexual in a lot of their writing, and I like it. Human beings are sexual critters.
That's what it's about, right? Yeah. That's what everything's about.
Everything is. That's how we perpetuate the species.
Yeah, this is an amazing song. I have a lot of history. This is another album that my dad would have me up late at night listening to, and more particularly, he'd have me listening to Love Me Two Times, People Are Strange, and When the Music's Over. Those songs are embedded in my mind from my very, very early youth. So
that'll happen.
Yeah, so I got started with the Doors pretty early.
Your dad could have been doing a lot worse things to you than introducing you to excellent music.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder because, you know, by the time 91 rolled around and I seen the movie The Doors, I fell in love with The Doors, and I started diving into everything about them. You know, I started collecting all their albums, and I haven't stopped to this day, you know, 30 plus years later. So, you know, it's hard to say whether it started with my dad, whether it started in 91, but I think all of it added together, that's what made me such a huge Doors fan. Okay, so let's move to the next song, Unhappy Girl. Lyrics on this one are by Jim Morrison. This song is basically written about girls that will spend their adulthood regretting the chances they could have taken when they were younger. So missed out on having fun, right?
Yeah, which is a rather controversial argument. There's plenty of people that regret living too wildly as they mature, but
Yeah, but it's easy to regret not living wildly because you don't know the outcome of it, right?
exactly. And to, regret chances that you didn't take. Absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of us that have made decisions with our lives that, for better or for worse, we either played it safe or we played it too risky.
And life turns out the way it's going to. So on this song, Doug Lubon plays bass. Ray Manzarek actually plays the keyboard backwards.
Dude.
And I read about this, and I'm not exactly sure. I think he played his keyboard part backwards, but then they overdubbed it back forward, so it gives it that kind of weird sound.
Yeah, because they did have this like sort of sound to it when you play music backwards. So I'm guessing that all he did was just basically read the music backwards and play it accordingly, rather than
Kind of interesting.
he went
fact.
right to left instead of left to right.
So what are your thoughts on this song overall?
I really enjoyed this song. Excellent use of the keyboard. Has a real funky feel to it. Real zippy. I like that.
Well, that's what I like. I really like the keyboard intro, and the keyboard throughout keeps a really good pattern to it. It just, once again, it's kind of a Doors thing, obviously, but Ray Manzarek is such an amazing player. And let me say it once again, all the members of the Doors are highly underrated at what they do.
Oh, they're extremely talented musicians.
Yeah, I love the vocal in this. Jim Morrison's vocals are great in it. I mean, you can.
He's got such a strong voice.
He does, and it's not. He's not an amazing singer. We keep going back to that word crooner. He is a crooner. He just croons for everything. And
this song, he does kind of like, he's got this drone, that baritone drones, and it gives you this hollow, haunting.
But when he wants to get to the strained screaming and stuff, he holds it so well, and it sounds so good. The bass line in this, they did well having Doug Lubon play, because the bass line's amazing in this, and it's got a really good little slide guitar solo in the middle. It's really short.
Is that what that was?
Yeah, it's a slide guitar. Again, shows off Robbie Krieger's playing and his diversity. To me, it's a little too short. Could add it a little time.
Sure.
But it's amazing. It shows him off.
That's what I felt about the first two songs on this album as well, is that they were kind of short, that they could have been longer.
Yeah, and I wish they were. Okay, so now let's go to the next song, poem, whatever you want to call it. Horse Latitudes. So this is
poetry reading.
A poetry reading. So this is a poem supposedly written by Jim Morrison in high school when he saw a paper book cover of horses being thrown off a boat. Now, Ray Manzarek said no, it couldn't have been written when he was in high school because the poetry and the words are too mature for that. So who knows? Keep in mind, Jim.
It's also Jim Morrison.
It's Jim Morrison, and at this time he was only 23 anyway. So
and reading like 1930s French literature.
Yeah, when he was 16.
Not French novels. Yeah.
Horse latitudes, they're actually known as ocean regions that contain calm waters and light winds that they come about because ships loaded with horses bound for America, they'd be delayed.
So they would seek out these calm waters that would help the animals to have a relaxing or calm ride.
Sort of, but the ships would get delayed and that would cause the horses to die. So it has something to do with that. I don't know. I mean, this song has got strange sound effects throughout it. Apparently it's got bottles dropping in garbage cans. They're smacking coconut shells on the tile floor. There's people screaming, or they've used a tape recorder for white noise, right? To give it that kind of background noise.
Yeah, there's stuff going on, but nothing like that. I mean, you know that it's intentional, but it's not musical. If that makes sense. This is all.
Yeah, it's certainly not musical. You just
dry
got
poetry.
Jim reading his poetry with these funky sound effects, And the one thing I can say about this is it's certainly different, but this is another kind of quintessential Doors thing. You always had a little bit of this offbeat stuff with Jim Morrison. He did it more famously in the middle of songs.
Yeah.
And in stretches of songs, like in the end and when the music's over, especially when he did it like live, he'd throw a lot of these things in. And I turned to you and I said, we ought to start a band and call it Mute Nostril Agony.
Yeah.
An amazing band name. There probably already is one, but for me,
they do Doors covers.
For me, as much as I love this album, this is something that this one's even hard to rate because it's really not a song. It's just a little piece. And it's like 50 seconds long.
Yeah, this is a poetry reading in the midst to the background of some noise. Yeah,
So it's
from the windy
interesting.
opening to all the bottles in the garbage can or whatever.
Well, and here's where my bias comes out. If this was in the middle of a Rolling Stones song, I'd say it was shit.
I'm supposed to love this song.
You should, because you like strange things.
I know.
And this is Strange Days.
I'm supposed to.
So let's move on to the next song.
Yeah.
Moonlight Drive. So this is an old song. This is one of Jim Morrison's first songs he wrote. He wrote it while living on a rooftop in Venice, California, and that's kind of featured in the movie and in all the books you can read about him and things like that. It's the one we talked about that he sang to Manzarek on the beach.
Yeah, the love song.
Yeah, that made them two fall in love and start a band. This is also one of the earliest demos they recorded, and that's kind of an interesting listen if you ever get a chance. It's completely different than what hit the album.
Now I have to go listen to it.
Yeah, and they actually recorded this song a second time after their demo for their debut album, but they did not like it, and I've never heard that version. I don't think it's been released. They said
destroyed it.
They did something with it. I'm sure it'll come out during the 60th anniversary releases that I will be buying.
Let's hope.
But then they re-recorded it for Strange Days, and that's what we have here. Now, Robbie Krieger plays the bottleneck guitar on this one again, and Jim Morrison loved it. In fact, he asked Robbie to play bottleneck or slide guitar on almost every single song. He wanted it on everything. And once again, Doug Lubon plays the bass on this song. You've got a guy named Paul Beaver. He creates the sound effects with the Moog synth on this one.
He's pretty good.
He is. And this song was actually the B-side to the single Love Me Two Times. I think they should have released this as a single, but that's just my opinion. What are your thoughts on this song?
I think that's a fair opinion. Moonlight Drive is a really decent song. It shows Morrison's maturity in spite of his age. Writing this so young, it does have a mature feel to it. And honestly, I get lost trying to figure out Jim Morrison's lyrics.
Yeah, but they are so visual, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's
They're very
swim
visual.
to the moon.
Yeah. I just can't figure out what the heck he's trying to say, but I enjoy it.
Well, it just sounds to me like a simple love song done Jim Morrison style.
It is, and it's a real peppy song.
Yeah, and I like the keyboard intro to this. I think it's great. Bottleneck guitar in this, I'd have to agree with Jim on Robbie's guitar. I love it. The solo in this is amazing.
I don't even know what a bottleneck guitar is, but boy, I like it.
Yeah, it's amazing sounding. The solo, go listen to the solo on this one because Robbie, amazing guitar player. And, you know, Morrison, when his vocals towards the end, when it kicks up a notch and he gets into those strained vocals and he's kind of screaming, for some reason, when Morrison kind of screams or strains or whatever, it's under perfect control. It sounds perfect. It's one of the best things he does. This is a great song.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and I think it's a good way to finish out side one.
Oh, real strong finish for this album.
Do you want to get to side two?
Yep, flip it over.
Side 2.
Okay, so side two opens up with People Are Strange. This is one song that I have a lot of history with. So this was written by Jim Morrison and Robbie Krieger together. This was also released as a single. It reached number 12 on the U.S. charts. Reached number 1 in Canada for some reason. People must be more strange there. I don't know.
Canadians? Absolutely. They are more strange.
So the B-side of this song was Unhappy Girl. This was written during a time when Morrison apparently was suffering severe depression. It's basically about his perception of people he was walking by while on a walk up Laurel Canyon. Now, Laurel Canyon's where he lived for a while, and I've been up there in L.A. It's really interesting. It's kind of cool place. I've seen his house. I've seen the little market there by his house. It's interesting. Now, Robbie plays slide guitar on this one again. Ray Manzarek plays the Vox organ and piano, and Doug Lubon is featured on this one again on bass. One thing I love about this song is the intro. I love the intro. It's one of the first intros I learned to play on guitar. This song is one of the songs, it's one of my earliest memories of my dad playing this song, and it's still one of my favorite songs. What are your thoughts on this?
I like this song. It's got kind of this Halloween feel to the music again, where it's a little darker and kind of creepy, but it's supposed to be that way because it's trying to paint that picture that Jim Morrison's talking about.
It's kind of funny how they open up side one with Strange Days, and they open up side two with People Are Strange. I mean, I think they're just trying to say people are strange.
Yeah,
in general.
And it is a strange world, but it's full of strange people. And I think anybody that's really self-conscious or had some sort of social anxiety understands what it's like to come into a new place and people are strange to you, and they sometimes even treat you strange because they're still filling you out and you're filling them out, trying to figure out how you fit in with them and how they fit in with you, and everybody's trying to find their place in this world.
What do you think about the lyric, faces look ugly when you're alone?
That one, I'm not sure. That once again, when you suggest to me, okay, let's break down the specifics of the lyrics like that, I'm not sure what Jim Morrison's saying.
Well, it's like streets are uneven when you're down. I mean, that seems like you're intoxicated or something like that. You know, to me, this is a quintessential Doors song. I mean, this still receives heavy radio play to this day, and it features everything. You know, it's got good bass, it's got an amazing guitar solo in it. I love the little guitar licks in it before the pre-chorus. To me, this is just, with the memories I have of this song, it's just a short song, but it features everything from the Doors throughout the song. This is kind of a Doors history to me put together. This song is amazing. I love it.
It is a great song. I just love this tune. I mean, it's just kind of, it's a fun song to listen to. People are strange when you're a stranger.
I would have loved to
If
see him.
wishes were horses, then beggars would ride.
I never heard that verse.
I don't know what the song
But
lyrics
that's
are,
kind of
but
what I
like
was
that.
going to get to. I was going to say I would have loved to see a longer version of this song with big guitar solo in the middle and everything. With your new version, your new lyric there,
It kind of did.
it did
didn't
sound Jim Morrison-ish.
Probably because it came from a French novel.
No, most likely. So then we move on to the next song, My Eyes Have Seen You. Now, this is another early Doors song. This was apparently written by the band in Ray Manzarek's parents' garage in 1965. The lyrics are basically by Jim Morrison, and this is another one that was one of their very early demo recordings, and it's kind of an interesting recording there, too, because it ends up sounding nothing like this version that hits the album. What are your thoughts on this song?
You know, this song was a creepy voyeur song. This is about Jim Morrison taking another walk. His whole purpose in taking that walk is to go and creep on some girl or be a peeping Tom.
I don't know if I take it that way, but that makes sense. I mean, as far as the music in this thing, it's got a good bass intro that kicks into a good guitar lick.
It's got an excellent guitar in this, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, the guitar in this song is amazing on this. It's got an amazing solo once again, and I'm going to say it again. Robbie Krieger, highly underrated. Now, this is coming from a Doors super fan. You need to check him out because, you know, I think a lot of people don't like the Doors sound. The people, I should say, that don't like the Doors sound are really put off by the keyboard. At least that's in my experience, what I've heard.
Yeah, the keyboard's really overbearing in most Doors music. I'm not finding the keyboard overbearing in this album.
And see,
It's present.
I don't find the keyboard overbearing in anything they do.
I know, because they can do no wrong. I'm like criticizing your favorite child.
No, well, and you should. You should. That's what we're here to do, right?
Yeah.
To me, the organ's never overbearing, but I'm the first one to say when I listen to other bands and I hear too much keyboard or too much organ, I'm like, God, get that out of here. So I guess I do have a little bit of a double standard, but to me, it just fits with this band. Everything fits. This song, I love when it speeds up. Once again, Jim goes kind of to a strained vocal, a strained crooning vocal again.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. You know, I love the way this ends, just kind of on a repeat. This is an amazing song. I love it.
Good
and
song.
like a lot of the other songs, it's a short song. So we move on to the next song, I Can't See Your Face in My Mind. Another song, the lyrics are by Jim Morrison. He apparently wrote this about the inability for his mind to form images, basically of a girl or a friend or something he's lost.
Yeah, which is a very common defense mechanism that the mind does after a traumatic event. Traumatic being, you know, a breakup, heartbreak. You aren't able to, the same sort of thing happens after a death of a loved one, that you can't remember what their face looks like. Well, your mind isn't able to deal with that trauma or that stress that's going to induce, so it protects itself by erasing that image. Only temporarily, though, because as soon as you're in a safe place and you're doing better, then those images will come back and you'll be able to remember the person again. But it's a pretty traumatic thing, especially if it's the death of a loved one and you can't remember what their face looks like. It happens, but they'll come back.
Well, it's obvious the Doors didn't, and Jim specifically didn't have social media back then because he could have just stalked his girlfriend after he dumped her or she dumped him. But, this is a kind of a weird carnival-like sounding music to this. I like the sound. His baritone voice is good in it. Bass is really good in this song. It's kind of up front. I believe Robbie Krieger plays the bass in this song. It's probably featured more prominent in this song than most. The drums and the guitar themselves aren't very prominent in this song. It's still a really good song. What are your thoughts about the song?
I think it's a very well put together song. I think it's a real good work of art that they've taken and captured this phenomena or this post relationship that they're singing about extremely well.
Good song.
I like that song.
Okay, so that moves us on to the last song of the album, When the Music's Over. Now, just like on their first album, closed with an 11-minute song, The End, here we get When the Music's Over, which is an 11-minute long song to close out this album. Now, these lyrics were written by Jim Morrison on this one. It's an early song that they had played at the Whiskey as early as 1966. So this song had been around for quite a while as well. And like a lot of their songs, it kind of, as they played it live, it kind of worked its way and
evolved
into something bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, but it seems that Jim Morrison didn't want the night to end either.
So apparently they pulled at least the song title and the inspiration for the song name from a comment from the owner of the London Fog, where he'd always say, when the music's over, turn out the lights.
Turn out the lights and lock the doors behind you, boys. I'm not paying to keep the lights on.
Like I said, this is the longest song on the album at about 11 minutes exactly, and it's got some early environmental lyrics on it, which you don't hear from the Doors. When you get to that lyric, what have they done to the earth? What have they done to our fair sister? Ravaged and plundered and ripped her and bit her, stuck her with knives in the side of the dawn, tied her with fences, and dragged her down.
Oh, this is so brutal. This is such a ravaging.
This is very similar in the end, or I should say very similar to the end. That the end started out as just kind of a simple love song, but then it has all this middle stuff that Jim makes up and goes on these, goes on this long run into the Oedipus section and all that.
He's such a philosopher. He just can't help himself.
What are your thoughts on this song?
This has got some really cool musical sound to it. The floating, falling kind of sound does sound like the world is about to come apart. I mean, this is a very well put together song. I very much enjoy this. What are your thoughts? I mean, obviously there's several.
I just showed you
showed
you my notes, and I've got about 20 keynotes. So I would say this is probably my top 3 Doors songs.
Oh, wow.
I absolutely love this song. I think this song shows everything the Doors were to become. I mean, you start with the keyboard intro. It's absolutely amazing. This was probably one of my father's favorite songs, and he played this to me quite a bit. I love this song. So I've got the memories, and I just love how that opening with the keyboards, then when Jim kicks in with the the keyboard throughout this thing is so haunting yet so perfect. It's got little small guitar licks in the background. It's just amazing because the guitar isn't really featured as much in this, except the guitar solo in the middle of this song, which is absolutely amazing in my opinion. I think it is perfect. And Robbie Krieger had a hard time playing it. I guess he had to record it multiple times. And when you listen to this live, it is completely different live, but it's also done. And I don't mean the song as a whole. I'm talking about the guitar solo in the middle. It's completely different live. So obviously he had a hard time playing it. And I love it live as well. It's just different. Everything in this, the drums on this are strong in this song, and shows how underrated John Densmore was as a player. I don't know really what to say about this song, because other than everything or nothing, because Jim's lyrics in this are strong. The imagery you get from it, cancel my subscription to the resurrection, send my credentials to the house of detention. I mean, the lyrics in this are beautiful.
And the scope and range of his, the emotions that he's singing from, there's anger, there's sorrow, remorse, there's longing. There's so much range in what his vocals are doing.
Well, and the music follows his vocals too. That's what's nice about it, because after a while the music calms back down.
And this is for 11 minutes.
Yeah, the music calms back down, and you get into the portion where he says, "We want the world and we want it now." And then he screams now.
Yeah.
You know, and then it kicks back up. I love that. To me, like I said, the drumming is super strong in this throughout the whole song. The keyboards are amazing and very haunting. Guitar's not featured a ton. There's little licks, but where it's featured in the solo is absolutely perfect. Music is my only friend until the end, you know, is how it ends. And to me, this is a perfect, I would say, you know, this is in my top 3 favorite Doors songs and in my top 3 favorite songs of all time. Yeah. I love this song.
So I figure that when you rate this album on a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to give it like a 78.
Something like that. There comes my bias again. But to me, this is a perfect song. And I don't mean just, it's a perfect Doors song, but this is a perfect song, I think. To me, everything about it's great.
It's a work of art for sure.
Yeah,
it's a masterpiece.
Amazing song. So, what do you think about we get to winners and losers?
I think that's time for that.
Winners and losers.
Okay, Tyler, let's start off with you. What are your 3 least favorite songs? Or you could pick 2, whatever you choose.
You know, there was a couple ones that stuck out to me. The first least favorite I'm going to pull out is Horse Latitudes.
Yeah, there you go.
But this is, once again, the song that I should have absolutely adored.
Well, there you go again. I said song. Is this a song?
It's not a song. It's a poetry reading, and the Beatniks were all going to eat this up. I did not even get what he was trying to say. I didn't, now that I've looked at what the write-up is about the song, that it's about like a paperback cover of a picture of horses being drowned or thrown off a boat, and then finding out what the horse latitudes are, that
makes a little more sense. Yeah.
But this was a puzzle that I just could not figure out in the process of listening to it. But then again, it's Jim Morrison. I can't really fault him for being Jim Morrison. Even so, it just, it should have been my favorite, but it wasn't.
No, I understand.
Let's see, another least favorite. This isn't, I'm really struggling on the least favorites on this one, but one of them is My Eyes Have Seen You, just because it seemed creepy.
Which is what I like about it.
So I hate to give it that. There it is. And I'm going to pick You Lost Little Girl for least favorite, just because I didn't feel like Jim Morrison was all that into it. And I guess I can see why now.
He should have been into it.
He really should have.
If Pam was in there pleasing him, then who cares how the song turns out, right?
And really, I shouldn't even throw that one on the list. I don't really have a good reason to call it least favorite. It's just, this was in the middle for me.
Yeah, I understand. And you're not here to please me anyways.
No, I'm certainly, not in the proper position. I'm all the way across the room.
True.
So, where do you stand on these favorites?
Well, obviously, I'm going to take the cop out like you did and say Horse Latitudes, even though I think it's very important to this. And I've been listening to this for so many years, it would seem blank without it. And it's really not even a song. Like I said, if that was another band that come up with that, it wouldn't fit, but it fits with Jim Morrison. So I'm picking my least favorite, which I really like it. But my least favorite song, if I was to rate one, because I love this album, would probably be I Can't See Your Face in My Mind. The music to me, I love the lyrics and things like that, but the music to me is a little weaker than the rest. And those are really the only 2. And keep in mind, I love both of them, and I wouldn't take them off this album. I got to play by my own rules, right?
Yeah, that's where this gets a little funny for me, because I'm sitting there trying to give you my honest opinion about one of your favorite bands.
I've heard everything there is about the people that dislike the Doors, and I've had many arguments with people.
But you haven't heard them from me.
No, and that's fine. I want you to be truthful and honest.
Yeah, but I feel like I'm criticizing one of your children.
So tell me what your 3 favorite songs on this album are.
Okay, this one is a little bit easier to do, although there were some really good ones. I'm going to go with Unhappy Girl was one of my favorites. I really like the message of it. I like the music of it. It really it had that zippy, peppy tone to it, and the message is excellent that, hey, you can look back with regret, or you can take advantage of the opportunities that you have right now. I really like the message of it. Also, People Are Strange, one of my favorites, mostly because sitting there and listening to it and, understanding that he's just talking about going on a walk in this Laurel Canyon, and the way that he's viewing the world around him, just really it resonated with that philosopher chord in me. That's like, this is the sort of stuff that when I'm out on a walk down the streets of some big city, just looking at the people around me and all their faces, then that, faces are ugly when you're alone. What does that mean? I have no idea.
Yeah, but it's visual. I mean, it
Yeah,
makes you
is.
think.
Yeah, and it's just kind of the thoughts that go through your head. I guess on the opposite end of the spectrum, because I'm more, rather than Jim Morrison looking at all these faces and seeing ugliness, I look at all these faces and see what's right about them, see what's beautiful about them.
Yeah.
We're opposite ends of that spectrum, but I dig it, Jim. I really do. Also, I Can't See Your Face in My Mind. I'm calling that one of my favorites. And I call it that because of the phenomenon that he captures. I mean, once again, I'm really resonating with the songs that Jim's written that I get. Some of the songs that he's saying a lot, I don't get. Maybe I will.
Well,
with further listening.
And I have the advantage that I've listened to this album for so many years. As we've talked before,
You
some
got a
albums,
couple decades on me.
yeah,
here.
some of them grow on you. In fact, if you're going to listen to it multiple times over years, you must enjoy it. It starts taking on a different meaning. Yeah, I get it. And I rated I Can't See Your Face in My Mind as the song I probably liked least. And keep in mind, I absolutely love that song.
Isn't that funny that you're going to put it on one of your least favorites? I'm going to put it on my favorite list. I really enjoyed When the Music's Over. I did. What are your favorites?
So obviously, I think my number one favorite's pretty easy to figure out because I just got done
Gushing.
gushing over it. When the Music's Over, without a doubt. My second favorite, People Are Strange. And then the funny thing about it, my third favorite was one of your least favorites, My Eyes Have Seen You.
Oh, really?
I just absolutely love that song. I love the beat of it. I love how fast it is. I just love the imagery and the lyrics. And if it's dirty, I don't care.
Once again, that's a song that should have been one of my favorites.
But for me, if you want to hear my bias, I've got 6 others that tie for third place. So,
Sure.
So should we get to the album rating?
All right, now we can rate it.
Album rating.
Okay, Tyler, Strange Days, 1967, The Doors' second studio album. You've just listened to it for the first time, and I'm pretty sure you only knew 3 songs off this album
That's
originally.
right.
So after your first initial listen, what do you rate this out of 10? Keep in mind, I don't want you to play to me. It is my child.
I know it is.
I want to know your honest opinion.
And I also want to be invited back to your basement.
You could rate it a 1 and you'd be invited back.
Okay. And that's kind of the cool thing about this whole thing is that, everybody is entitled to their opinion on this.
Well, that's what I really want to know. I mean, and keep in mind, for you, on most of these albums, it's your first impression on a lot of these songs.
That's kind of the exciting thing.
You
about
had
this.
obviously heard People Are Strange.
Yeah.
You had heard Love Me 2 times, and you'd heard When the Music's Over. But past that, that's pretty much all you knew off this album.
Yeah, absolutely. And I enjoyed the album. I could see this album growing on me in time coming. The Doors isn't really my band. It's not.
Yeah, I get it.
It's not my sound. That being said, boy, there's a lot in here that I really enjoy. It's kind of like when you go to an art gallery and you see a whole bunch of like abstract modern art, and you're like, oh, look, somebody just threw a bunch of paint up on the wall and splattered it, and who cares? Then you take notice of something for the first time, and you realize, well, there is a little bit of method to this madness. There is a bit of a pattern to the splatter. All of a sudden you start to get intrigued and you start to understand what it is that the artist is trying to tell you. That's what I felt listening to this album, going in completely lost, getting lost in Jim Morrison being a philosopher and an abstract poet. But then on the back end of it, I'm coming out of this like, wait a second, I'm starting to understand some of this. I'm starting to get the message. I'm starting to get the Doors. Because I enjoy that so much, I'm going to bump this one up from originally a 7. I'm going to give it an 8.
That's better than I thought you would give it, honestly.
Yeah, honestly, for what I know about the Doors and how I normally feel about the Doors, I was thinking I was going to be on the south end of 5. I'm starting to come around and starting to see it. Go ahead and slap your solid 10 on this album.
Well, let's say this. Most days, this is my favorite album. And other days, it's tied for my worst album of their 6.
Oh, yeah?
I guess what I'm saying is the Doors, there's 6 studio albums with Jim Morrison. I love them all. And they're all a different feeling for me. They're to me, this and the first one are very similar. Once you get into Waiting for the Sun, it's a little bit different. When you get the Soft Parade, it's completely different. So is Morrison Hotel, so is LA Woman. And they're all a different day, a different feeling, right? Obviously, my bias brings this album to a 10. And I'm not, I mean, this was my pick. We're going to go through all the Doors albums sooner or later. It is what it is. You know, I don't know. It'll be a while before we get to their third album because we've got a ton of albums to do. We've got a lot of review requests in we got to do, but it was time to do the Doors' second album.
And I can see why you give this a 10. I really can. Knowing you as the friend that you are to me, and knowing what I see about the Doors and Jim Morrison, I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get it. This really strums that resonating chord with me.
And there's a lot of Doors detractors or people that just can't stand the Doors. I think it's kind of like anything else. I've got the bands I can't stand, and you may not know them because a lot of times we probably want to do their reviews because guess what? This is our podcast.
Yeah, maybe we should do Taylor Swift sometime.
Yeah, that ain't going to happen.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, that's what I mean. No, but in all honesty, we're going to get to as many bands as we can, whether we like them or don't, because I want to discover new music too. And this isn't discovering new music. I went into this knowing exactly what I thought of this album. Most days, this really is my favorite Doors album. I think Strange Days is absolutely amazing. No doubt it's a 10 for me because it's got 3 or 4 songs on it that are probably in my top 20 favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
And it's just a strong album, even excluding Horse Latitudes, which I never would do.
I want to learn a little bit more about Horse Latitudes now.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it?
For it being such a poetry reading, there's a story behind there, and I'm intrigued. So now this is an album that I gave it an 8, and I really want to learn a little bit more about. One of the reasons I gave it an 8 and bumped it up from, I was thinking 7 right after we finished, but then we started talking about favorites and least favorites. This has got me thinking, and it's the fact that this band got me thinking, and it got me really looking into it. And now I want to learn more about them.
Yeah, and for me, you either get the Doors or you don't. I'm sure it can be acquired, but obviously you're not going to try and acquire it if you don't really care for them. It is what it is, you know. And there's a lot of people that like the Doors hits, and that's about as far as it goes, and that's fine as well, you know. But I've devoured them deep, and it is what it is. They're definitely one of my favorite bands.
Yeah, so if you want us to quantify or qualify our adoration for the Doors, send us an email. We'll respond.
Exactly. So that's the Doors' second studio album, Strange Days. I hope you enjoyed it. Go take a listen and let us know what you think. Any complaints, comments, suggestions, album review suggestions, anything you got, send them to classicvinylpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Podbean, all those, you know, wherever you find your podcasts, we're out there. We really appreciate all your questions and comments. Find us on Instagram and Twitter. But until next time, we appreciate you listening.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to Classic Vinyl Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Classic Vinyl Podcast for updates, and also share us with your music-loving friends.